The beautiful thing about a symphony is every instrument is absolutely necessary. No one instrument is bigger, better, stronger than the other. It takes all of them for us to have a spiritual awakening. So step 12, chapter 7, page 89 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, where the steps are located. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. It's very specific. You can help when no one else can. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. That is so powerful. Dawn, you will have an hour and you'll hear a 5-minute warning and then a 1-minute warning. Always, I love hearing you share. We're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Candace. Don Landis, alcoholic. Can everybody hear this? Give somebody move their hand, wave. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I want to thank Woodstock West and my dear friend Ralph for the kind invitation to come early this evening and participate in this wonderful event. My sobriety date is September 16th, 1991. I have a home group. It's the SOS Men's Group. We meet in Bellingham, Washington on Monday and Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock at St. James Church in the Fairhaven district of Bellingham, Washington. If you don't know where Bellingham is, don't feel bad. Go to Seattle, then travel about 100 miles north, stop 20 miles from the Canadian border, and you'll be in Bellingham, America's first defense against Canada, I suppose. Up in the Pacific Northwest, lovely place to live. Moved here about 15 years ago from the Los Angeles area. Found out they have good AA there too. Isn't that amazing? That wherever you go, in our modern society, you'll find AA at your destination if you look for it. And what a convenient thing that is, and what a blessing that is in my life. And I've been tasked this evening with talking about our 12th suggestion, which is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know what any of that meant. I wasn't interested in any of that. It was very wordy to me. I was trying not to drink whiskey that night. You know what I mean? I was trying to figure out if I could go to the meeting and hear something that would enable me not to go home and get drunk. I'm a real alcoholic. I'm not a social drinker. I'm not a heavy drinker. I'm the guy that thinks the bad idea is the good idea. I am a slave to King Alcohol. I'm a shivering denizen of his mad realm. I am all the things that the big book describes. I found myself all over that thing when I read it for the first time and thought, how unusual is this that a book that was published in '39 is applying to my daily life when I got sober in September 16, 1991. They knew I was coming. And isn't that what Good Alcoholics Anonymous is? Isn't that the spiritual preparation that we do as individual AA members? Because we know they're coming. And they did a lot of work. And you know, when I came to AA, I want to be very clear about this. I walked into a little place called the Simi Valley Alano Club. And I walked into the back for my first meeting, and in the back, there were tables set up. There were big books out on the table. The coffee was on and made. There was literature prominently displayed. There was someone that was going to lead the meeting that night that was sitting up in the front that had a format somebody had taken the time to write. There were wicker baskets they were going to pass around for a thing they called the Seventh Tradition. And I walked into the apparatus of an AA meeting. And I must tell you, I took advantage of all of it. And that's exactly why it was there. That's why they set that meeting up, was for the new man or the new woman when they walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was my job in the equation at that time, was to take advantage of it. But I'm not new anymore. I'm 28 years sober. And it took me years to understand that a lot of men and a lot of women endured a lot of inconvenience, a lot of interruption to their pleasures, and they did it with dignity and grace and a willingness that was attractive to be there for the next man or woman who walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. They looked at it as a divine appointment. They looked at it as a call to duty. They looked at it as the most important thing in their life. My first sponsor was fond of saying, just to the extent that I'm willing to be inconvenienced for my fellow alcoholic, that's the true extent that I walk with God. He said, you can talk to me in windy arguments about, spiritual philosophy. You can tell me what books you've read, but the rubber meets the road. And am I willing to be extended for my brother and my sister in Alcoholics Anonymous? And my first sponsor was a living, breathing example of 12-step work. And so I learned from the masters. I learned from these guys who didn't think there was anything more important in life. It was more important than making a buck, more important than their personal pleasures. They understood that all good sprung from their sobriety. So I'm incredibly grateful and a little amazed to be sober. And that's the good news that Alcoholics Anonymous brings to new people. Because if you're like me, I got here at the low point of my existence. My tank read 0. My scorecard is 0 and my tank's on empty. If the quality of the raw material that I bring to the game of recovery is going to have anything to do with a successful outcome, then I'm a dead man. But the good news about AA is it doesn't work because of the alcoholic. It works in spite of the alcoholic. And isn't that true in my case? And I'm so grateful for that. And I want to tell you, I didn't see this coming. I don't have a legitimate reason for ending up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really don't. I wish I could, I had the childhood story I dragged into AA, which is very tragic. And if I tell it just right, somebody will feel sorry for me, which was always my goal when I told that story. But, when you get a sponsor and they take you kicking and screaming through the steps, you get the complete story of what really happened. So like most members of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have the sincere pleasure of living 2 separate lives. I've lived the life of the drunkard and I've lived the sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous life. But because of the steps and what happens in that process, I've also had 2 childhoods. The one I dragged into Alcoholics Anonymous with me and the one that I know to be true today. And they're very different also. And like Sandy B likes to say, the longer I'm sober, the better my childhood gets. So I don't really have a reason for why I'm alcoholic, other than the fact of what happens when you put alcohol in my system that has the ability to almost instantaneously change my view of reality. And I love the effect produced by alcohol. And what is the effect? Well, for me, it's relief. And relief from what? What swirls around in my head in a sober state. That's the shameful, embarrassing secret that I brought to Alcoholics Anonymous, the one I had been hiding from the rest of the world, the one that I didn't have an answer for. Because if you look at the way I live, if you look at the consequences in my life, and you look at the failure, and you look at the violence, and you look at the dishonesty, you can't figure out why I'm doing it. And the big secret I bring to AA is, I know what it looks like, but you don't understand. I absolutely hate the way I feel when I'm sober. And that's embarrassing and it's shameful in light of the things I do, which conspire to make the people around me that love me, they want to ask a couple of questions. Because it looks like this. It's one of 2 things. 1, I'm either lying, or 2, I'm not trying very hard. Which one is it? And nothing could be further from the truth. Every time I quit drinking, I wasn't lying. Every time I quit drinking, I didn't feel like I was being delusional or I was in denial. I meant it to the fiber of my bones, but I was powerless to carry out that plan. And I didn't know there was no room for the truth where alcoholism was played out. And you think I'm not trying, you don't understand. I have a front row seat for the destruction of my life. You don't think that with every breath I take, I'm not aware how it slips so far away, how I'm so far away from where I thought my life would turn out, that I wake up and it's in the morning with me. I go through my day, it's in the day with me. I go into the night, it's in the night with me. This thing that I can't get rid of, this constant clamor in my head that the only thing that soothes it is pouring whiskey over it. And then I reach oblivion and then nothing's getting done. And I'm trapped in that box of self-obsession and drinking, and I can't get out. And I didn't see any way out. And I'd surrendered before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not the surrender we suggest our new friends make. It's a surrender of a desperate man who's had one more attempt and one more failure. One more attempt and one more failure to quit drinking under his own power. And if you go through that process long enough, you'll hit a point where you'll say, I just can't do it anymore. It's too hard. Who am I kidding? I'm never going to get sober. And you start making your life small and manageable to allow room for your alcoholism. And you do it without your permission. You do it without a conscious thought. It's almost instinctive to preserve your right to drink. And I've heard people say by the time I came to AA, my life was very small. My life was as big as it had ever been. My life is my life. It's my son. But it had taken over everything. Because the way alcoholism worked in my life is it took all the things outside of me that you can see. You know, it took my money, it took my career, it took my relationships, it took my love of sports and of music. It took these things from me. And when it took everything from the outside it started taking the things that money can't buy from the inside. Hope and dreams and potential and a feeling like life is good and I have a right to be here. And when it took everything from me that you can possibly take from a man, when the kind thing would have been to kill me and leave me dead, it didn't have the decency to kill me. It turned its sights on my family. And now it starts stripping my family of their hope and their dreams and their potential. And they can't sleep at night. And they don't know how it's going to end because they have the misfortune of loving an alcoholic. This thing we talk about, this alcoholism, this thing that we are talking about today, this book called Alcoholics Anonymous that we study, we are in the fight of our life. We have something that is the perfect predator, in my opinion, because as the book says, the main problem of the alcoholic resides mainly in his mind rather than his body, which means this thing lives in my thoughts. It lives in my voice, in my head, whispering sweet things that appear to be the truth. And when you live in my head and you have the perfect vehicle and all the time in the world to get me, I have no defense against it. So by the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't come here to get sober. I knew I wasn't getting sober. I'd proven it to myself for 5 or 6 years of trying everything I could think of, and I always end up drunk. The dumbest thing I think we tell our new friends, we've been saying it forever. We don't drink no matter what. Well, let me tell you something. If I could do that, I wouldn't need you. Do you know how long I tried to not drink no matter what? You know what that leaves me? Half crazy, going out of my mind and my own skin, physically sober, where when I pick up a drink, I feel like I'm picking up a drink to preserve my sanity. Like I'm going to literally die or explode if I don't get drunk. Don't drink no matter what. I'm powerless. I'm beyond human aid. And that's the raw material that walked into Alcoholics Anonymous on September 16th, 1991. And I want to tell you, I'm a product of our 12th step. If there were people that didn't believe in this and didn't believe it was the only job in AA, that everything else is activity, that we only have one job to carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. If I wasn't surrounded by people like that, you'd have somebody else talking tonight because I have nothing to do with the solution. And I want to tell you, I have a good life today. And I have a life that if you didn't know I was an Alcoholics Anonymous, you would look at it and think that's a comfortable, good life. And you would look at some of the trappings of my life, some of the condiments of my life, where I live, what I do, what I drive, successful marriage, this kind of stuff. And you'd think, that guy's doing pretty good. And they couldn't see the failure. They couldn't see the chicanery. They couldn't see the desperation. They couldn't see a guy that died by inches for years. They couldn't see a guy that could get no traction in their life. And if they were to find out about my membership in Alcoholics Anonymous, they would still be attracted by the shiny things on the outside. And they would say, boy, that AA really works, doesn't it? And they don't know a damn thing about AA, do they? Because that's not what I'm excited about. It's about the bounce of my step and the glint in my eye, that I can't wait to see what's going to happen next, that I'm a part of something that's bigger than me, that I've been given the keys to the kingdom, that for the last 28 years, I've lived as a free man. And I can go anywhere that free men go and do anything that free men do. And that was not the case before I got here. And I owe that to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't want to ever forget who came here and how you resurrected my life and the process that you took me through in order for that to occur. I don't want to ever take any credit for that and think I had anything to do with the solution other than to show up with some willingness. As my sponsor taught me, whatever you got that day, bring to the game. Now, some days you're going to have more than others, bring it. Some days you'll have less than others. Bring it. But whatever you got, bring to the game of recovery every day. Because it don't take much of a man to make this program, but it does take all of him. And only you will know if you're making an honest effort. And it seems to me, from observing what I've seen in Alcoholics Anonymous over the years, it's the people that have made an honest effort that seem to do well. It's not about the starting position. It's not about how low you are or how high you are, how much trouble you have in your life or how little trouble you have in your life. It seems to be about who's done, who's had enough that they're willing to try some different actions. You see, that seems to be where the rubber meets the road around here. Who's willing to take the actions dictated in the first 164 pages of that big book of ours? And the ones that do seem to stay sober, keeping in mind that it's a one day at a time program. This is not academic. This is not a curriculum. This is not one and done. This is not, I do it once, I work the 12 steps, I get my diploma, I skip down the road sober and have a good life. This is one day at a time. This is a day that I have to work my program today. This is a day that I have to recommit to my relationship with God today. This is a day that I have to remember I'm powerless over alcohol today. This is a day I have to remember that my very life as an ex-problem drinker depends on my constant thought of others and what I can do to help meet their needs and live in the spirit of that 12th step. AA, so much of AA is about spirit. It's not of the mind, it's of the spirit. It's an approach. It's a change of heart. And a vision for you. It says that we're the type of people that after this process, we will have our hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others. And because of that, the things that signify so much to some people will end up meaning little to us. And it doesn't mean that the things of life aren't attractive to me, the outside things, and having a good meal and great travel and good music and art and all these beautiful gifts that we have in the world that people create that we get to be a part of. Doesn't mean that that's not important. It just means above all that is the idea that I am uniquely qualified to carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. And that's what I need to remember. If God needs me for anything, and I can't imagine why he would need me. I mean, he can make a butterfly and he can make a baby smile. What would he need a broken down drunk like me for? Well, maybe to manifest himself through me to my brother and sister alcoholic. Maybe I'm uniquely qualified because I speak that language of desperation. I want to read something to you real quick that's really important to me. It's on page 18 in the big book. It says, but the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can genuinely win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. Little or nothing was accomplished in my life, and I had been surrounded by well-meaning, loving people my entire life that had talked to me about my drinking. And they told me, and I was brainwashed by the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, you're such a great guy. You're such a sweet guy. You have so much potential. You could probably be anyone you wanted to be, go anywhere you wanted to go. If you just quit drinking, everything would be fine if you just quit drinking. And what do? I lay my experience down against that. And I go, wow, I went to jail. I was drinking, smacked that guy. I was drinking, blew up the job. I was drinking, blew up the relationship. I was drinking. And it makes sense to me that I'm really a wonderful human being. Just ask me. All I have to do is quit drinking. And I'm brainwashed into thinking that all I have to do is put the plug in the jug and I'll be fine. But you know what nobody could explain to me? How come every time I quit drinking in very short order, I go absolutely insane in my own mind? And I'm so grateful that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and got a sponsor who explained this to me. I don't remember my first night in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was detoxing out of my brains. I don't remember anything that was said, but I know I was there. But I remember my second night in Alcoholics Anonymous because it's the most important night of my life. You know, and looking back, that was the night everything changed. That was the night I was given the keys to the kingdom. That was the night that every spiritual tool basically was laid at my feet. And if I was willing to pick it up and learn how to use it, I would never have to drink again. But of course, my second night of recovery, I wouldn't have recognized any of that, would I? I didn't have eyes that could see, and I didn't have a heart that could feel. I wouldn't have been able to tell you this is the biggest night of my life. In fact, I would have told you this is the worst night of my life. I was coming up on 48 hours without a drink of alcohol. And I didn't look that night the way I look today. You know what I mean? I got hair down to the middle of my back and it's filthy because I don't shower. I got a full beard with food stuck in it. I've lost the ability to speak the King's English. I can't talk straight. I communicate in a series of hand gestures, grunts, and clicks. I'm wearing my sunglasses at night. I'm sitting with my back against the wall at the Simi Valley Alano Club with my tough guy radar out, daring them to come talk to me. And I am dangerous because I'm terrified. And anybody terrified is dangerous. And I want to be clear, the good men and women of Alcoholics Anonymous at the Simi Valley Alano Club that night were giving me a wide berth. They didn't want any part of me. They didn't want a piece of this alcoholic. You know what I mean? They're staying on the perimeter. And this disease that resides mainly in my mind started talking to me. Look at them, Don. Look at them. They're clean and they're happy. They're wearing matching socks. They don't want nothing to do with you. Why did you do this to us, Don? Why have you quit drinking again? Why do you play this game? Why do you think it's going to be different? Because what, now you're in AA? Why do you do this? You put us through all this pain, hanging on, not drinking. Then what do? You drink anyway. You know what? Here's an idea. Why don't we get out of here and get a drink? Because you know you're going to do it anyway, Scooter. You always drink. Why don't we bypass the pain and go get drunk? And I can't come up with a solution for a head that is that loud. And so I'm leaving Alcoholics Anonymous on my second night of recovery. And I'm not leaving because God doesn't exist. And I'm not leaving because steps don't work. And I'm not leaving because help isn't available to me. I'm leaving because I suffer from an obsession of the mind greater than my human power. And I am doomed to repeat the desperate experiment of the first drink. I have no effective mental defense against leaving that clubhouse and going and getting drunk. And it's going to cost me everything. It's going to cost me the place I live with the last relative on the planet that loves me. It's going to cost me my freedom because I have warrants for my arrest. And more than likely, it's going to cost me my life. But that's a small price to pay, isn't it? If it will make the madness between my ears stop for just a couple of hours. And I caught a break. I mean, that's the truth. I caught a break because over in the corner were two good members of Alcoholics Anonymous named Lou and Mark. Now, this is the most important moment of my life. I want to be clear about that. Whether I live or die is going to be decided in the next few minutes. But for Lou and Mark, it was Tuesday. You know what I mean? And Lou and Mark were where they were every Tuesday night between the 6 o'clock and the 8 o'clock meeting at the Simi Valley Alano Club. They were hanging out together, drinking that AA coffee, telling those AA war stories, telling those off-color jokes. But most importantly, they had their eyes trained on the room and then their eyes trained on the door. And they were looking for men to 12-step. And they did something that I believe is the most important action we will ever take in a meeting hall of Alcoholics Anonymous. Certainly more important than who's speaking or what the format is. Two good members of Alcoholics Anonymous walked 30 feet across a clubhouse to cordially welcome a man to Alcoholics Anonymous who was dying from the disease of alcoholism. Hi, my name is Lou. This is Mark. We don't think we've met you. Why don't you come sit with us? It seems like such a niceness, such a politeness, doesn't it? Why do I think it's so important? 30 feet for Lou and Mark. For me, it's a million miles. Don't you know where I've been, what I've done, who I've hurt? Don't you understand? I can't get my eyes off of my shoes. You expect me to go shake hands? No. I'm at the low point of my existence. You see, Mark and Lou understood the terms of engagement for recovery from alcoholism, that they would have to carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. And they carried that kindness and they carried that identification to me. And that's the beautiful thing about AA. I mean, my first sponsor used to joke with me. He goes, look, man, we know you took a long, long, dangerous walk into some dark, dark, dangerous woods. But here's the thing. You walked in alone, but you're walking out with us. And we're Alcoholics Anonymous. And we know the way. So grab our hand and hold on tight because we don't want to lose anybody. And that's what AA does. See, AA meets you where you're at. It doesn't tell you get your stuff together and then you can come join us. It doesn't tell you learn how to behave and then you can come join us. It doesn't tell you we don't do that. And when you can pull your stuff together, now you can be a part of AA. It doesn't do that. AA met me where I was at. You got to understand, I'm a screaming locomotive and I'm out of control and I'm on a fast pace to the penitentiary or the graveyard. And something as majestic and powerful and beautiful as Alcoholics Anonymous laid down across the tracks and took the full impact of an alcoholic screaming out of control. And AA takes that impact and arrests our forward progress long enough that it can pull us to safety, and hopefully we'll start taking some actions we don't yet believe in. I sat down with these two good members of Alcoholics Anonymous. The big guy, Lou, continued to stand. He clapped me on the back. He pointed at the other guy, Mark, and he said, Don, this is Mark. He'll be your sponsor. And they assigned me my first sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I know that's not done everywhere. I understand that. But in my case, it's a very good idea, because if you're waiting for me to ask somebody to sponsor me, it's going to be a very long wait. I suffer from false pride. I have an inability to ask for help. I don't lose it doesn't matter how bad my life gets. I do not lose the ability to judge you. I'm the kind of drunk that can lay in a gutter. And as you walk by, I'll say, where'd you get those ugly shoes? I never lose my ability to judge. So I'm incapable of asking for help. And they knew that. So suddenly they assigned me a sponsor. And in that moment, my whole life changed. And here's why. He was an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, which meant he had a home group, which meant I had a home group. Now, I didn't know what that meant, but I was going to find out in short order. He was an active member of AA, which meant he had commitments within our society, little jobs that he did, committee work that he did, 12-step work that he did, meeting work that he did. And because he had little jobs, I would have little jobs. He was an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, which meant he knew a lot of people around here. He had a lot of friends in AA. And I found out when you get a sponsor and he knows a lot of people, they become your friends. Now, I got to tell you, when I was new, that didn't feel like an asset. You know what it felt like? Is suddenly there were a lot of people up in my business. But isn't that remarkable, though? You find a group of people that in short order find out everything there is to know about you, good and bad, yet they still love you and accept you. And suddenly all these things are laid at my feet. And I have a sponsor in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a home group. I have a set of actions and commitments that I'll be taking on a regular basis, tethers that tie me to the program, these ropes that tie me to the program, these non-negotiable commitments that keep me close to you, keep me close to the warmth, keep me close to the power, right? All these things on my second night of recovery, and I couldn't have seen the value in it with a microscope. Completely blind to what had just been given to me. But only looking back do I see the value in that. Only looking back do I realize on my second night, you gave me the keys to the kingdom. Because if you talk to me today at 28 years and you go, what do you admire about the program AA's given you? I'd say, man, I got a home group with a bunch of guys I love. I count on these guys and they count on me. That's where I draw the line in the sand, and I make a stand for my life on a weekly basis, on almost a nightly basis. You know, I got commitments in the program that keep me close to you, keep me close to the warmth, keep me close to the power. I'm so grateful for the commitments that wrote me into Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so grateful I have a sponsor that I have a transparent relationship with that knows everything there is to know about me and still loves and accepts me. You know, all those things I had my second night, and yet here I am 28 years later, and they're the most important things in my life. This thing doesn't have to take forever to happen in your life. Good AA, the spiritual apparatus that is AA, is up and running when the new man or woman walk in and we absorb them. And what my sponsor used was the age-old spiritual principle of invitation. You see, in AA, we don't dominate. In AA, we're not better than. We're equal to. We're not above anyone or below anyone. We commence our common journey shoulder to shoulder with the new man or the new woman. We are simply drunks that don't drink anymore, and we know the way. And we're trying to share our experience, strength, and hope, and be helpful and be friendly. But my sponsor never came at me like he was better than me because he had more sober time than me or he'd been here longer than me. In fact, by using the spiritual principle of invitation, he left me with a little dignity, didn't he? He'd roll up on me and he'd say, hey, Don, I got to be at the meeting early tomorrow night and set up. I could really use your help. And I think to myself, wow, my sponsor needs my help. And I'd think, anything for you, spons. And I'd show up early and I'd help him set up the meeting. And when we got done, he'd look me in the eye and he'd go, hey, man, I want to tell you, kid, really appreciate that. And I'll tell you, I've been some places. I've done some things. I've accomplished some things in my life before Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can't figure out for the life of me why a nod from a guy named Sponsor at a place called Alcoholics Anonymous, showing me a little appreciation, meant more to me than all of it. It made me feel like I was a part of. It made me feel like I was worthy. It made me feel like God wasn't done with me yet, that maybe there was something I could do that was worthwhile, because I had felt like a failure for so long. I love those little commitments early in my recovery that gave me a sense of purpose. And as time went on, he would roll up on me and say, hey, Don, we're starting a committee. It's called an ad hoc committee. We're going to study some of the problems we're having carrying the message into corrections. You strike me as a pretty bright guy. We'd really like your input. And I thought to myself, wow, I got to AA just in the nick of time. These people really need me. And he used my ego against me. He knew how to play the alcoholic. He knew that it felt like I was being helpful. It's a funny thing about human nature. It's not just alcoholic. You got to put people on your team. You know what I mean? It's like telling somebody what to do doesn't work. I don't like to be told what to do. Today, I don't like to be told what to do. But if you phrase it this way, I need your help. There's something that goes off with the divine spark within me. The God voice within me awakens. I am built for service. And I believe all human beings are to a degree. That divine spark we talk about in we agnostics, that inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, maybe obscured by pomp, by circumstance, by worship of other things, but in the final analysis, it's only there that he can be found. That thing that we're looking for, that we're looking with, that's as much a part of me as the feelings I have for a friend. When you ask me for help, it awakens. When you ask me for help, it becomes excited. When you ask me for help, it stands up and moves forward. And that's without my permission. I think that's how I was built. I think that's closer to what the manufacturer had in mind when he put me together. And my sponsor knew that people, and alcoholics in particular, need to feel necessary, need to feel purposeful. So he gave me opportunities to be of service. And you see, I'm a selfish, self-centered alcoholic. So everything that I've been programmed, all the old ideas and the old thinking that I have tells me that I don't want to do it. Isn't that funny? The thing that's going to save and change my life, I'm intellectually battling it. I'm intellectually fighting it. Do I want to do it? Will it be fun? Why is he asking me? Don't you have anybody else you can ask? You know, that kind of stuff. And I'm discovering through taking action, not through thinking, but through taking action, that I'm wrong. And I remember one night he rolled up on me and he said, listen, after the second meeting tonight, because we went to 2 meetings a night, he goes, we're going to go help Smitty move a couch. And I didn't like Smitty. So I said, Smitty's a jerk. And he goes, yeah, he is a jerk, but we're going to move his couch. And so after the second meeting, there we are moving Smitty's couch, and I'm bitter, right? I'm not looking at anybody. I'm not smiling. I want nothing to do with it, right? We get done moving Smitty's couch, and Smitty rolls up on me, and he does the worst possible thing that could happen, right? He gives me one of those big AA hugs. And then he says, look, kid, I'm not as young as I used to be. And I couldn't have done that without you. And I really, really want to say thank you. And I thought, oh, no. Now I can't hate him, you know. Now I'm in my sponsor's truck and he's driving me home. And he catches me grinning, you know. And he says to me, he goes, feel better, don't you? And I wipe the grin off my face and I go, no, it was horrible. It's terrible. And the truth is I felt great. And I thought, oh, no. What if it's true? What if it's true that the thing that lights my lamp and brings joy and happiness and purpose into my life is service to others, like they say in AA every night? Oh my God, I didn't think they meant it. I didn't think it could possibly be true. And suddenly I'm discovering for myself that this is how it works. My sponsor starts taking me through all 3 sides of the triangle simultaneously, unity, service, and recovery, without ever telling me he was taking me through all 3 sides of the triangle. And he used another old spiritual principle. It's called example. He was a living, breathing example of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I saw him move through the fellowship with a dignity that I couldn't explain. I saw him do it with a degree of gratitude and happiness that I couldn't explain. His operative word in his life was yes. He was always doing something for somebody and looked to be grateful for the opportunity. And you know, he was on fire with Alcoholics Anonymous. He was a guy that was lit up by the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, lit up by the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, lit up by doing service in Alcoholics Anonymous. And all I can tell is I made the mistake of standing too close to him too many days in a row. And one day I burst into flames, because you got to be careful who you hang out with in AA. And you hang out with those zealots, you hang out with them happy people, you hang out with those people that love to do service, you hang out with those people that got a smile on their lips and a song in their heart, you might end up liking sobriety too. And I'll tell you, man, it happened for me. These guys taught me how to be happy in sobriety, and they taught me the way to it, the path to it, because I'd have never figured it out. I would have never figured out being of service was the way to happiness. And I watched these guys do 12-step work, and they were magnificent. I watched these guys grab their big books, get into cars, and go into neighborhoods that they had no business being in my opinion, right? Completely convinced that God would keep them safe, that they were on a divine mission. And they wouldn't let me talk because I was the new guy. They said, you get to come, but you don't get to talk. You don't know nothing. You're going to hurt somebody. And so I would sit there and I'd watch the hand of God work through these alcoholics. I watched the hand of God reach into the abyss. I watched it grab a still suffering alcoholic. I watched people try Alcoholics Anonymous, and I watched people get well, and it changed my mind about everything. You can't see it in your own life, but when you see it happen to the guy sitting across the table and you in AA, when you watch the lights come on, when you were there when they 12-stepped him, when you watch 6 months later when he's reunited with his family, when you watch the bounce in his step and the light in his eyes, you see God working in that individual. It changes everything. And so my sponsor taught me how to be an AA member, and he took me through the steps. And more importantly, he taught me how to be a man. He taught me how to live as a sober man. You know, he had a thing that he used to say that was interesting. He'd say, you know, you're not just a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're a representative. And we can't be with you all the time. And you know, it's easy to look good around here. It's easy to learn the language. It's easy to say the right things. It's easy to sound spiritual when you're called on in a meeting. He goes, but we're not with you out there. But if we find out about you, we want to hear good things. And he told me that it was absolutely essential that I practice these principles in all my affairs. He said, you know, Don, if your neighbors were to find out that you were in Alcoholics Anonymous, what would your neighbors think about you? And what would they think about AA? If your boss was to find out you were in Alcoholics Anonymous, what would they think about you? And what would they think about AA? If the world in general found out you're in AA, what would they think about our society? Would you reflect positively or negatively on your society? And he was a living, breathing example of somebody that reflected well on AA. If you were to find out my sponsor was in AA, you'd say it must be a great organization, because he was a kind, respectful, polite man. And he was aware of his surroundings, which meant he was aware of you. And I watched, he was always on point for kindness. Whether he was getting coffee or he was buying something in the store or just the way he drove his vehicle, he was conscious of other people and trying to be kind. And I watched that living, breathing example of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I saw the right way to do it. It didn't mean I could do it at first, but at least I was given the correct example. And as my life got better, because I come to AA, and I got to tell you something funny about AA. You know, I come here with a loser's resume. So my sponsor, when he 12-stepped me, right, he did what the book talks about. He tried to find out as much about me as he possibly could so he could help me, so he would know how he would like to be approached if he was in my shoes. And the funny thing about AA, the worse you are, the better we like you. One of the first things he asked me, he goes, are you working? Well, I hadn't worked in a year, you know what I mean? Living at my sister's house, no car, warrants for my arrest in 2 counties, you know, all that stuff. And I said, no, I'm currently unemployed. If you're out in the real world and you happen to be unemployed and somebody says, what do you do for a living? And you go, well, I'm currently unemployed. They'll be embarrassed. They'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I hope I didn't make you feel bad. And they'll get away from you as quick as possible. Not in AA. When my sponsor heard I was unemployed, you know what he said? Oh, that's great. In fact, everything he found out about me, he got more excited. Oh, you live at your sister's house and you're 31 years old? Of course you do. Oh, you haven't had a car in years? Why would you? Oh, you don't work anymore? Why, who would hire a guy like you? He got excited. The lower my bottom was revealed to him, the happier he was about it. The worse you are in AA. We found out I owed the IRS $80,000. He didn't lie to me. Listen, my sponsor wasn't a guy that tried to lie to me and make me feel better about my life. He was very honest. When he found out about all the details of my life, he looked me right in the eye. He goes, boy, Don, I got to tell you, I'm not going to argue with you. Your life sucks. Absolutely. Absolutely. He goes, Don, I make a gratitude list every night. And since I started sponsoring you, you're on my gratitude list. At the end, I say, and God, thank you that you didn't make me Don. And he'd laugh and laugh and laugh. He'd think it's the funniest thing in the world. But when he found out I owed the IRS $80,000, he put it into service in Alcoholics Anonymous immediately. I mean, for the next 5 years, if any newcomer complained about their IRS debt of $1,000, my sponsor would interrupt them and go, hold that thought, Jimmy. He called me over. Hey, Don, you got a minute? And I'd walk over all innocently, and he'd go, Don, tell Jimmy how much you owe the IRS. And I'd look at Jimmy, the newcomer. I'd go, I owe the IRS $80,000. And Jimmy would say, Jesus. And I'd go, just want to be of service. And I'd walk away. My sponsor told me, whatever you bring to AA, don't feel bad, man. We're going to put it into service here. Your experience is the most valuable thing you have. You'll make somebody feel better, maybe because their life isn't as bad as yours. Who knows? And man, that was true when I was new. That was true. And those are the guys I identified with. I didn't identify with the guys that never had trouble in their life. I identified with the guys that had a lot of trouble in their life. And because they learned how to live in AA, they found a different way to go. And that was my sponsor, because he would allow me to identify with him. He would talk about the trouble he was in when he came to Alcoholics Anonymous. But he was a funny guy. He'd go, you know, Don, when I came to AA, I got to tell you, I was in a great deal of trouble. He goes, now you're new and you're in a lot of trouble. I got to tell you, this is better. So he taught me how to be an AA member. He taught me how to go to meetings. He taught me how to have commitments. He took me through the steps, and they had the desired result. I had a psychic change, right? I had a spiritual awakening. And now that I'm spiritually awake, the trick is not to go back to sleep. And how do you not go back to sleep in Alcoholics Anonymous? How do you have that spiritual awakening as you arrive in the 12th step and not go back to sleep? Well, in a way, it's rinse and repeat, isn't it? You know, I can have a wonderful, wonderful spiritual day. I can have a great day as an AA member. You know what I mean? Where you're doing the 11-step review at night and you're looking at your day and you're going, man, I was kind and loving towards all. I didn't miss any opportunities to be of service. I haven't kept anything to myself. I'm not keeping any secrets. I don't know anybody in a pub. That was a good day. And I spent most of it with God. Well, and that's wonderful. And that's great and good for me. But it's absolutely useless the next day, because our spiritual structures are built on the beach out of sand. And at night, it seems that God sends the waves in. And in the morning, you got that clean palette, don't you? And it's time to start building again. It's time to start having that spiritual awakening. You know, we think when we talk about the spiritual awakening that I hear people talk about it as though it happens once. It has happened to me thousands of times in my sobriety. And why have I had spiritual awakenings 1,000 times in my sobriety? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Because I've spiritually gone to sleep thousands of times. And you can't wake up if you don't go to sleep. And how many times have I been spiritually asleep? How many times have I forgotten what I'm supposed to be doing in Alcoholics Anonymous? And what brings me back to the spiritual awakening? What reconnects me with God and therefore connects me with you is always this 12th step. And I learned from the masters. And they absolutely insisted that I be willing to give this thing away and make it the #1 priority in my life. And it wasn't my idea. I started sponsoring people when I was 6 months sober. And I've never been without the honor and the privilege of sponsoring men in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't want to do it. I mean, I'm 6 months sober. And the way I started sponsoring people is I went on a 12-step call. And I went on a 12-step call with a guy with 14 years and another guy with 6 months. And we went and we saw this guy who was still drinking, but he called Alcoholics Anonymous and he said, man, I don't think I can do this anymore. Would you guys come talk to me? And that's what you do. You go into their house, whether they're drunk or not. And so we took our books and we went to visit this guy named Donnie M. And Donnie's drinking, man. He's half in the bag. And he looks at us and goes, don't try to take my Jack Daniels. And we go, Donnie, we don't do that, man. And besides, keep in mind, Scooter, you called us. We didn't call you. We're just here to talk and be friendly. And so the guy with 6 months that was with us, he hit him with his 6 month stuff, right? Which was great. And then the guy with 14 years hit him with his 14-year stuff, and it was remarkable. And then I hit him with my 6 month stuff, which sounded a little bit like this. I haven't drank in 6 months. I live at my sister's house. I don't have a car. I have a tyrannical figure in my life. I call a sponsor. I'm pretty sure I don't like him and he doesn't like me. I work minimum wage with taxes taken out. I hate my job. I can't say I'm happy much of the time. I don't know. If you want what I have, and that's the message I carry at 6 months. How am I going to help anybody? But we're supposed to be honest, and that's where I was at 6 months. And I hated my life at 6 months. You need to understand that. I mean, my sponsor got me a job working construction. I'd never worked construction before. I'd never worked with my hands. I sucked at the job. I had a nickname on the job site, the Bleeder. You know what I mean? So I have a job that I hate. I go to AA all night, every night. And, I'm 6 months sober and I'm not drinking. That's the only thing I can see. My sponsor can see my life's getting better. The other AA members can see my life's getting better. They can see the change in me, but I can't feel it. And I certainly can't see it. So I'm disgruntled a lot of the time. And so I went to work the day after this 12-step call. We're up late like we are. And you get up with no sleep and you go to work and you feel great. Isn't that funny? Get an hour of sleep and you feel like you slept 12 hours if you've done a 12-step call. It's just amazing how God takes care of us. So I go to work and I go bleed at the job all day like I normally do. And I get off of work and I go home and the phone rings and it's this guy, Donnie. And because I gave him my number and he says, hey, man, where's that meeting you were talking about? And I can't believe it because he was drunk the night before. Now he wants to go to the meeting. So I give him directions to the meeting and then I ask him, do we need to come pick you up? And he goes, no, man, I got a car. And I thought, wow, he's doing better than I am. So now I got to race down to the clubhouse to beat the newcomer there so I can cordially welcome him to AA, which I did, which I've been taught. I'm introducing him to people. I get him coffee. I'm doing what we do. And we sit down and we're talking, just a couple of drunks talking. And he goes, listen, man, that stuff you said about sponsorship makes sense to me. Would you be willing to sponsor me? And I said, I'll get right back to you. It just freaked me out. So I ran across the clubhouse to find my sponsor and said, hey, that guy last night, the 12-step call? He goes, yeah. I go, he's here tonight. He goes, oh, that's great. I go, yeah, he asked me to sponsor him. He goes, oh, that's beautiful. What'd you say? Well, I told him I'd get right back to him. My sponsor's face changed and he said, wait a minute, he was drinking his brains out last night? I go, yeah. And somehow he made it to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? Uh-huh. And he took whatever strength he had left and asked you for help? Yeah. And you said you'd get back to him? Yeah. Go say yes to him, you selfish bastard. And then he walked away from me like he always did. When he was done talking, he'd just walk away. And I'd see his bald head going off in the distance. So I yelled at his bald head. I said, hey, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to kill him. He didn't even turn around. He just waved me off. Said, you got to kill a couple before you get the hang of it. Oh, my God. Alcoholics Anonymous, we care. No, we don't. No, we don't. So now I'm sponsoring this guy. And I'm thinking, what in the world could I possibly offer this guy? I'm so embarrassed of my life and how I'm 6 months sober, but I've got nothing going on. You know what I found out? Donnie didn't care about none of that. He didn't care that I didn't have a car. He didn't care that I lived at my sister's. He didn't care that I was broke and hopelessly in debt. He didn't care that I worked for minimum wage. When Donnie got a year in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I asked him, I said, Donnie, of all the people you could ask for help, why in the world would you ask me? He said, I heard your story. And I figured if a loser like you could stay sober, it'd be a snap for a guy like me. So you never know what message you carry. And I got to tell you, Donnie and I became really good friends. And then a year sober, he wanted somebody more spiritual and he moved on. But here's the funny thing. Donnie's still sober today. He's got 6 months less than I do. And that's not because of me. That's because he took the actions in his relationship with God. But I got to tell you, I didn't know who to help, right? I would have missed that opportunity to be of service because I wouldn't have known who to help. I wouldn't have felt adequate. I wouldn't have felt that I had anything to offer. I would have felt like I'll leave that to people that are better suited. And I would have cut God out of that equation. You see, we forget, don't we, that God runs AA. We forget it all the time. And I mean, my sponsor, I remember being perplexed and confused. Look, man, I got no problem helping people, but who the hell am I supposed to help? How will I know who I'm supposed to help? And my sponsor just smile and go, oh, Don, God made you. He knows everything about you. So he knows you're not very bright. The people you're supposed to help, he's going to put them right in front of you so you can't miss them. So when you see somebody in front of you, whether it's in AA or out of AA, just assume they were put there by God Almighty for you to help and nothing else. And I've never forgotten that. Whether I'm driving in traffic or I'm in the supermarket, or I'm talking to one of my neighbors, they're there in that moment in time for one reason and one reason only. God put them there and I'm supposed to do something. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just supposed to be friendly. Maybe I'm just supposed to listen. Maybe I'm just supposed to be polite. Or maybe there's something bigger I can do for them. I don't know, but I don't believe there's any mistakes in God's world. And what a funny spiritual game that would be. I wonder kind of world that we'd live in if everybody woke up in the morning and said to themselves, everyone I meet today has been put there by the Almighty, and my job is to try to make them feel better. What if we all went out every day of our life and approached life that way? What kind of a world do you think we'd live in? I think it'd be a pretty cool world. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, you taught me that I can have that world, that I can be rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence. But it starts with me, that I have to be the example I want to see in the world. And my sponsor showed me how to live that way. He didn't care how he was treated. He didn't care how people treated him. He just wanted to be that living example of what AA could be. So I've sponsored people for, 27 and a half years of my 28 years, whatever. I've always been sponsored in that. So I've been in both sides of that equation. I've always been willing to do 12-step work, carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. It's the bright spot of my life. And it's the thing that brings me back to you. It's the thing that brings me back and connects me with you. Because here's the thing about God's will and self-will for me. When I'm in God's will, you materialize. Isn't that funny? When I'm in God's will and I'm simply thinking about what God would have me do and what my next action will be, the people of the world take shape and they take form, and their importance automatically, without my permission, grows. I can't think about God without thinking about what I can do for you. They go hand in hand. They are connected. The other side of that is when I'm in self-will, without my permission, you start to disappear. You start to become shadowy figures in the background. You become bit players in the bizarre movie that's my life, and you become less important to me because I can't see you through the cloud of self. And this 12-step work keeps bringing me back to the spiritual awakening. And I am awakened to the possibility and the power of the Almighty only when I'm of service to you. And I'll tell you what, it's usually through a process where it feels like interruption. It feels like people are being insinuated into my life. It never feels like, oh, good, here's an opportunity to be of service. I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'm tell you two quick stories, and then I'm going to stop. The first one is, I sponsor a lot of people, and I always have. So I was, it was one of those AA days and nights. You know what I mean? I worked all day, and I was taking AA calls all day. Then I went to a meeting at night. I met a sponsee before the meeting, met a sponsee after the meeting, gave another guy a ride home. I get home, it's 10:30 at night. I haven't had dinner yet. I've cooked some dinner up. I sit down at the coffee table. I just want to eat my dinner. By now it's 11 o'clock at night. I take my first forkful of food and the phone rings. It's a guy sponsor. And I said out loud, God damn it, can they leave me alone for a minute? And then I answered the phone. Hey, buddy, how's it going? Hey, no problem. What's going on? I get off the phone, and my wife, who's 27 years in AA, Eileen, looks at me with disgust and goes, well, I certainly hope my sponsor doesn't sound like that when I call. And I was like, oh, well, you're so spiritual, right? But she got in my treehouse, man. You know what I mean? I started thinking about it. Next day, I call my sponsor, Robert C. from the Pacific Group, and I tell him the story, and I go, do you ever go through that, Robert? He goes, oh, yeah, Don. He goes, you don't have, nobody's a saint, because as long as you take the call and you're appropriate. He goes, but yeah, man, I don't like to be interrupted. That's my selfish part. He goes, but Don, never when you call, never when you call. And that's the funny part of it. I'll tell you this, and then I'm going to stop. This is why I think we sponsor people. When I was 10 years sober, man, I got really sick. And I was sick for a year, not a week, not a month, but a year, right? And at the end of the year, I was not happy about being in AA. I was not happy about being on the planet. I was not a lot of fun to be around. And they put me on experimental medication. They told me it's either going to work are you going to have a bad reaction? And I had the bad reaction. You know what I mean? I went to work. I made it like 20 minutes. I had to rush home. I'm in the worst pain I've ever been in. And I am pissed off. And I'm mad at God because I feel like he deserted me. And I'm mad at AA because I didn't think this stuff should happen to you if you've done everything you've been asked to do for 10 years. And the self-pity is just dripping off the walls, right? And I'm feeling so sorry. And then the phone rings. And it's the guy I sponsor. And I'm thinking, not now. But I got good training and I answer the phone. And he goes, how you feeling, Spons? Because everybody knows I'm sick. And usually I lied, you know what I mean? I'd say, well, I'm having a tough day, but with God and AA, I'll be fine. How are you? And I'd change the channel on him, you know? But for whatever reason, this time, I told him the truth. I let it fly. I said, how am I doing? Let me tell you how I'm doing. I'm in the worst pain I've ever been in. And you know what? I think I'm going to die. And guess what? I don't want to die. And I feel like God's deserted me. I can't find God. I feel like the words are bouncing off the walls while I'm trying to pray. And I hate myself because I'm so full of self-pity. I just hate how sorry I'm feeling for myself. And I just hate everything that's happened in my life. And I'm so angry. And, you know, and I feel so lost. I don't feel like there's any safe direction. And you want to know how I feel? That's how I feel. Dead quiet on the other end. And after a couple of seconds, he goes, oh my God, Spons, I'm so sorry to hear that. Listen. I met this girl, and that's why we sponsor the newcomer, because they just don't care how we feel. Baby bird, feed me, feed me. They will insinuate themselves in between your pleasures, in between your lust, in between your goals, in between your money. They will save you from yourself again and again and again. I am grateful for the blessing of all the men I get to sponsor that on a consistent basis insinuate themselves into my life and are a constant spiritual wedge into my constant thought of self. God bless Alcoholics Anonymous and the ability to work with others. It is the bright spot of my life. Thanks for listening.
Woo!